I stood by the sink, my hands still wet from the last dish, as the front door shut behind him. The porch light caught the edge of the pie tin he didn't take, still wrapped in foil, still warm. "You should be grateful we even came," my son had said, his voice flat, jacket already on. Grateful. After raising him alone, after giving up my seat at every table so he could have one, after hosting 11 Thanksgivings without once being thanked, I was supposed to be grateful for his presence. He left without looking back, and that was the moment I started making sure he'd never walk through that door again. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The table was modest, 4 mismatched chairs around it, thrifted serving bowls, and a turkey just slightly too big for the baking dish it came in. But everything gleamed. Caroline's tiny kitchen had that soft, lemon-clean scent, the kind that clings to a home where someone still scrubs baseboards by hand. A candle flickered in the middle of the table, wedged between a bowl of mashed potatoes and an unopened bottle of wine no one had offered to uncork. Rachel didn't look up from her phone. "Is that work or just a screen addiction?" Caroline tried lightly, ladling gravy into a ceramic boat. Her voice was breezy, but her eyes searched Rachel's face. Rachel barely blinked. "It's a group chat. I'm multitasking." She flicked her thumb, another story swiped past. Her acrylic nails glinted like tiny shields. Adam sat at the head of the table, uninvited, but somehow always in charge. He carved the turkey with a self-important air, pausing occasionally to examine the meat like a judge at a state fair. "This isn't brined, is it?" he said, not looking up. Caroline smiled through her answer. "No, I roasted it with, yeah, that's what I thought." He made a face, chewing noisily, dry in the middle. From the kitchen doorway, Harper caught Caroline's eye. She was drying dishes even though dinner hadn't started. Quietly competent, sleeves rolled up, movements careful, deliberate. She always helped without being asked. A small nod passed between them, invisible to everyone else. Joan was already 2 glasses in. She swirled her wine and said nothing, but her gaze pinged off each family member like she was keeping mental tallies. "Let's eat before it gets cold," Carolyn said, placing the final dish on the table. Green beans with slivered almonds, her mother's old recipe. No one thanked her. The meal passed in jabs and silences. Adam dominated the conversation. His job, his car, a new rental property in Scottsdale. Rachel scrolled and snorted at something on her phone. Joan asked Harper one polite question about college, then ignored the answer halfway through. By the time the plates were half finished, and the stuffing picked over, Caroline was already stacking dishes, the dishwater steaming. Adam stood and stretched like a man who'd done the world a favor. Well, that was something. Harper came up behind Caroline, placing a hand gently at the small of her back. It lingered, warm, grounding. "Need help with cleanup?" Caroline gave her a small smile. "Go sit. I've got this." The front door opened. Rachel was already outside, earbuds in. Adam slung on his jacket and muttered, "You should be grateful we even came." Caroline didn't turn around. The dish she held, a thrifted ceramic with a tiny chip at the edge, slipped beneath the water. Her hands stayed there, motionless, swallowed by suds. The faucet kept running. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the small house. She didn't speak. She just stood there, breath shallow, fingers pruning in silence. The candle flickered behind her. The house, which she'd cleaned, prepared, and warmed for them, now sat hollowed out, like the scooped carcass of the bird Adam had butchered with critique. Joan watched her from across the kitchen, one hand curled around the wine glass, the other steadying herself against the counter. "You're gracious to a fault," she said softly. "Maybe time to subtract the fault." Caroline turned. A single tear carved its way down one cheek, more exhaustion than sadness. She wiped it away before it fell, but her eyes had changed. They weren't wet anymore. They were sharp. The scent of turkey fat still lingered in the air the next morning, faint and greasy, clinging to curtains and corners like a hangover. The dishwasher hummed behind her, loaded with other people's silence. Caroline sat at the dining table, her table, wearing the same navy cardigan from the night before, sleeves bunched at the elbows. A chipped yellow legal pad rested in front of her, the kind with soft curled edges that looked older than it was. A manila folder sat at her right elbow. Across its flap, in neat cursive, she'd written, "To reconsider." She opened it like someone disarming a trap. Inside, a notarized copy of her will. Her fingers hesitated on the first page. Her name, her address, and then Adam Reed, sole beneficiary. No hesitation there, no backup clause, no division, no nuance, just Adam, alone, stamped in legal permanence. She sat back in the chair, stunned not by surprise, but by the weight of a truth she had signed into being herself. She had handed him everything: the house, her savings, the life insurance, even the antique clock from her grandfather's study, the one Adam said was too loud for modern interiors. A faint clinking noise came from the dishwasher. A glass shifting. Something settling. Caroline picked up a pen. She turned over a fresh sheet of paper. Inventory of kindness. Inventory of cuts. At the top, she drew a line down the middle. Left side, kindnesses. Right side, cuts. She started slow. A soft tremor in her hand, as if her own generosity resisted the documentation. Kindnesses. Drove Adam to the airport after his DUI. Helped Rachel pay off her second credit card. Hosted every holiday for 11 years. Paid for Harper's second semester textbooks. Covered Joan's tax penalties 2018. She paused. Looked up. The clock above the stove ticked just once. Loud. Cuts. Adam. Dry in the middle. Rachel. Left before dishes. Every time. Joan. Called her domestic. In a sad way. Adam. Never stayed past dessert. Rachel. Never said thank you. Not once. She reached into the folder again. Behind the will were old grocery receipts. Hundreds of dollars spent over Thanksgivings, Christmases, even random birthdays. Spiral hams, organic cranberries, wrapping paper, pre-cleaning services for the carpets no one noticed. She stared at one receipt. The total was $482.76. Last year's Thanksgiving. Adam had shown up an hour late and left with half the leftover stuffing. Another paper, slightly torn, still had a sticky note attached to it. Caroline. Just the basics for dinner, please. Don't go overboard this time. A turkey's a turkey. Adam. She added it to the cuts column. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves skittered against the kitchen window in sharp, dry clicks, like fingernails tapping glass. Caroline didn't flinch. She picked up her pen again and wrote a single sentence beneath both columns. They came for the table, not the woman who said it. She stared at it for a long moment, let it sit there like a verdict, and then, without ceremony, she reached for the will. Flipped to the page with Adam's name. Her hand hovered. The pen clicked open. She didn't sign anything. She drew a line. The office smelled like old paper and bergamot tea. The windows were streaked from last week's rain, and the radiator let out a long sigh every 10 minutes, as if the building itself was tired of everyone's secrets. Caroline sat across from a man with a wool tie and thick-rimmed glasses. Eli Granger, estate attorney. Small nameplate on his desk. Smaller frame, but his eyes were quick, clear. He didn't speak in the sing-song way most professionals did when talking to older women. He just waited. Caroline clasped her hands together. I want to remove them. Entirely. She said it plainly. No tremor, no apology. Eli nodded once. No reason needed, he said, reaching for a folder with a blue binding clip. Just clarity. Caroline didn't smile, but something unlatched in her jaw, like a muscle that had been clenched so long it had forgotten it could let go. I've brought everything. She opened her canvas tote and pulled out the manila folder marked to reconsider. Now swollen with annotated documents and flagged pages, a copy of her existing will, a printed account summary, several notes in her own handwriting. She slid them forward without ceremony. Eli glanced through them, scanning, with practiced ease. You've done half my job already, he murmured. She let out a short breath through her nose, not quite a laugh, more like the ghost of one. He flipped to a blank form. Tell me how you'd like to restructure. She answered without hesitation. Living trust, effective immediately. Harper Myers as sole personal heir. He paused, pen mid-stroke. Harper, your niece? Caroline nodded. Not by blood, but yes. Eli wrote it down. Do you want to notify her? No. Her voice was firmer than she intended. Not yet. A moment passed. The radiator hissed. Eli didn't push. She shifted forward in the chair, spine straightening. And I want a clause, 5%, maybe 10, for youth mental health nonprofits, local ones, not national. Something traceable. Eli made a note. Specifics? She pulled out a business card from a battered wallet. This one, she said, placing it on the desk. The Bridge Center for Teens and Families. My sister thought therapy was for the weak, Caroline said softly. Harper nearly broke herself in half to unlearn that. Eli's eyes didn't soften. He simply nodded. Bridge Center gets 10%. Done. For a long moment, the only sound was pen against paper and the faint rustling of law books behind him. Caroline watched his hands, precise, quietly efficient. She wondered if this is how people felt when they finally signed divorce papers, not heartbroken, but air-cleared. And your healthcare proxy? Eli asked. She didn't hesitate. Joan stays on. She's competent, even if she's cruel. But I want Harper added. Joint. No Adam. No Rachel. Caroline's expression didn't flicker. No. Power of attorney followed. Then digital assets, burial preferences, safe deposit box access. It all poured out of her like she'd rehearsed it in her sleep, because she had. Night after night, lying awake in a house scrubbed clean and echoing with nothing. Eli clicked his pen closed. You'll get the draft by Friday. I'll send a courier for signatures, or you can come back in. Caroline stood, smoothing her coat. I'll come back. He reached out, offering his hand. She took it. As she turned to leave, he said, almost absently, You're not the first client to clean house after Thanksgiving. She paused at the door. I'm not cleaning, she said quietly. I'm reallocating. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Downtown flags snapped against their poles. She zipped her coat tight and crossed the street slowly, not because she was tired, but because, for the first time in a long while, no one was waiting on her. At the corner, her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Can you email me your stuffing recipe? Adam wants it for Friendsgiving. Caroline didn't respond. She stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then she slid the phone into her bag, turned left instead of right, and kept walking. By Thursday morning, the stuffing recipe still hadn't been sent, and wouldn't be. Caroline sat at her desk, the one wedged between a bookcase and the narrow window that overlooked the quiet back alley behind her home. The cursor blinked in an open email reply to Rachel, the subject line still intact. Stuffing. Please send by Thurs. Her fingers hovered, not over the keyboard, but the mouse. She clicked delete. No hesitation, no draft saved, just gone. She opened a browser tab and logged into her online banking. There, in the list of linked accounts, sat one she hadn't looked at in months. Emergency transfer, joint A. Reed C. Birch. A placeholder account she'd opened years ago, just in case. After Adam's first brush with unemployment and a late rent payment, he never reimbursed her for. She selected it, clicked Close Account. A red warning box appeared. Closing this account will notify the secondary account holder. Proceed? She clicked. Yes. She was done with warning boxes. Next came Medicare, she called. Waited through the classical hold music. Verified her identity twice. Then the representative came on. Chipper and impersonal. Carolyn calmly asked to remove the emergency contact listed on her file. Yes, she said. Adam Reed? Remove entirely. The voice on the line didn't ask why. They just confirmed and made the change. Next came her investment platform. Then her retirement fund portal. Every login peeled back one more layer of old assumptions. Every click a slow undoing of a life she'd built on habit, not honesty. She scrolled to beneficiaries, and there he was again, Adam Reed, 100%. She stared at the number. It looked absurd now, blunt, like an overbid on something no one had asked for. She deleted him. The system flagged the field as incomplete. She typed, Harper Myers, 90% Bridge Center for Teens and Families, 10% she hit save. Caroline leaned back, heart steady, but her eyes scanning the edges of the room like something might lurch forward from the shadows. But nothing did. No sirens, no angry phone calls. Just stillness, clean and cool. Her landline rang. Joan. Caroline let it ring twice, then picked up. I just got a call from that tax attorney of yours, Joan said. No preamble. He needed my updated address. Said you'd listed me again on the medical stuff. Not Adam, not Rachel. Caroline didn't answer. Joan exhaled, something between disbelief and admiration. You just disinfected your legacy, didn't you? There was no malice in her tone. Just awe. I didn't disinfect it, Caroline said. I reclaimed it. Joan laughed softly. Well, you've got teeth finally. I wondered. I've always had teeth, Caroline said. I just stopped filing them down for people who bite. Joan paused, then added, I hope you told Rachel to get bent. I deleted her. As in, digitally, that's enough for now. Caroline hung up before Joan could reply. Not rudely, just finished. She opened her contacts list, typed Birch into the search bar. The group chat auto-filled, Adam, Rachel, Joan, and herself, with the group name, Birch Family, Holidays, Birthdays, Emergencies. She opened it, clicked Leave Group. A prompt asked, Are you sure you want to exit this chat? She didn't click yes right away. Instead, she renamed the group on her phone, Unsubscribed. Then she left. Outside, a neighborhood kid pedaled by on a red bike, streamers flying from the handlebars. Leaves spun in his wake, scattered across the street like confetti for something newly won. Caroline turned off her phone, and in the silence that followed, she didn't feel alone. She felt clear. But just as she stood to make tea, the mail slot clattered. She walked to the door, bent down, and picked up the envelope. No return address. Heavy paper. Her name handwritten in ink she recognized. Inside, a wedding invitation. Adam Reed and Rachel Carson. April 12th, destination, Napa. And below, in faint penciled script, You're still family. Caroline stared at it. Then, without a word, she slid it under the burner of the stove. The knock was soft, almost uncertain. 3 quick taps, then nothing. Caroline didn't move at first. She was in the kitchen, drying a single plate by hand even though the dishwasher was empty. For a second, she thought maybe she'd imagined it. Then came a 4th knock, firmer this time. She opened the door to find Harper on the porch, half smiling, a brown paper bag held in both hands like a peace offering. I brought muffins, Harper said, breath puffing in the cold. Cinnamon, the bakery near campus burns the bottoms, but I kinda like that. Caroline stepped aside. I don't mind burnt edges. Harper walked in slowly, shrugging off her puffer jacket. Her cheeks were pink, hair tucked behind one ear in a way that still made her look 13. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and black tea, the kind of scent you notice only when it doesn't belong to you. Caroline motioned toward the living room. You want coffee? Harper shook her head. I'm good. They sat at the old wooden table near the window, sun spilling through like it was trying to warm something without asking permission. Caroline opened the paper bag. 6 muffins, warm, uneven. Honest. Harper picked at the seam of her sweater. I don't like how they talk to you, she said finally. I just never knew what to say. Caroline broke a muffin in half and passed one piece across the table. No napkins, no fanfare. You don't owe me words, she said quietly. You're here. Harper nodded, eyes brightening just slightly, like that sentence had hit some place she'd been defending too long. They didn't fill the silence after that. They let it breathe. The puzzle sat in a box on the bookshelf behind Caroline. A winter scene. Horses pulling a sleigh through fresh snow. It had been half finished since last February. Caroline pulled it down, opened the lid, and spread the pieces out on the table between them. Harper smiled. No commentary. Just began flipping the edge pieces face up. An hour passed, maybe more. They worked in sync, hands crossing, trading corners, the occasional murmur when one piece clicked into place. No pressure to speak, no expectation to explain. At one point, Harper slid a corner in and leaned back in her chair. I might be leaving, she said, almost offhand. For school. Caroline didn't stop sorting. Where? Chicago, or maybe D.C. Depends on funding. Scholarships? Applied. Waiting. But it's far. Caroline placed a piece into the bottom right corner of the sleigh. You want to go? Harper nodded. I need to. I love my mom, but if I stay, I'll keep shrinking. Caroline's throat tightened. She didn't let it show. Then go, she said. Shrink nothing. Harper looked at her. You know I wouldn't ask you for anything. I know. But I mean, if I did, Caroline didn't look up. Just placed another piece. If you do, she said, I'll help, if I can. Harper didn't say thank you, didn't cry. Just picked up another puzzle piece and got back to work. Outside, the sky had gone pale with that winter gray that feels heavier than clouds. A wind picked up. The bare branches of the maple in the front yard rattled against the siding like bones trying to get in. Caroline stood to close the window. On the sill, tucked beneath a ceramic dish, sat the wedding invitation. She'd forgotten she hadn't burned it after all. As she reached to finally toss it into the trash, Harper glanced up and saw the names. Wait, they're getting married? Caroline's mouth tightened. Apparently. Harper blinked, then let out a dry, shocked laugh. Well, that's like mixing oil and oil. She took the invitation, turned it over. No RSVP card. You going? She asked. Caroline stared at the puzzle on the table. Almost a quarter done, still so much blank space. I don't know yet, she said. But something in her tone made it sound less like uncertainty and more like planning. Snow had started before dawn, fine, powdery flakes that made the street look airbrushed. By the time Caroline reached Eli Granger's office, the city was wrapped in a kind of hush, the kind that makes footsteps sound personal. She shook the snow from her coat in the narrow vestibule and climbed the stairs. The waiting room smelled faintly of printer toner and peppermint. A clock ticked somewhere behind the frosted glass door. Eli's assistant greeted her with a smile that knew what this morning meant. Mr. Granger's expecting you, she said. Eli stood when Caroline entered, a stack of papers already fanned out on his desk, each page marked with a blue arrow. The radiator hissed again, just as it had the first time she'd been here, but now it sounded almost companionable. Ready? He asked. Caroline nodded. Let's finish. He slid the pen toward her. Heavy, silver, engraved, E.G., though the initials might as well have stood for enough given. Caroline read the header on the first document, Living Trust Agreement. Her name printed cleanly beneath. No other names followed. She signed, initialed. Page after page, the sound of the pen a small, deliberate rhythm, like a metronome keeping time for the life she was choosing. Eli watched, saying little. The only instructions were gentle. Here and here, just your initials there. No hesitation, no questions. By the 10th page, the muscle in her hand ached, but she kept her pace steady. Last will and testament. Healthcare proxy. Power of attorney, each one bearing her signature, her mark, her authority. Adam's name appeared nowhere. Rachel's, nowhere. When she reached the charitable clause, she paused, not out of doubt, but reverence. Bridge Center for Teens and Families, 10%. She wrote her name in blue ink beneath it and let the pen rest an extra beat before moving on. Eli gathered the completed pages into tidy stacks, his motions crisp and practiced. 3 copies, he said. 1 here, 1 for your secondary contact, Joan Lawson, correct? And 1 for your home safe. Caroline nodded. Top shelf, left corner. I've already cleared the space. He smiled faintly. You're ahead of me. When everything was clipped, notarized, and sealed, Eli handed her a shredder bin lined with a thick plastic bag. The original will? She reached into her tote and drew out the older document, the one that had haunted her desk for weeks. Adam's name in black type across half the page. It looked small now, smaller than its weight had ever been. Caroline fed the pages into the shredder. The blades caught, whirred, and began their steady chew. She watched until the last strip disappeared, the machine's hum fading into silence. Eli offered her a cup of water. She shook her head. I'm not angry, she said quietly, just done. He studied her a moment as though deciding whether to believe her. Then he nodded once. Done is good. Done means forward. She gathered her coat, buttoned it halfway, and stepped toward the door. Outside, the snow had thickened. Streetlights blurred into halos, and cars crawled through the whitened intersection like patient animals. She walked carefully, the folder of documents pressed against her chest under her coat. Each step left a perfect imprint that filled almost instantly behind her. At the corner, she stopped to wait for the light. A city bus rolled past, its advertisement plastered with a smiling couple holding champagne glasses. April 12th, celebrate the perfect union. Her breath caught, the date from the invitation. She looked down at the folder, then back at the bus disappearing through the snow. Her reflection in the glass door beside her showed something she hadn't noticed before, the faintest smile, not warmth, not joy, anticipation. The envelope was plain, no watermark, no seal, just Caroline's name, typed cleanly in the top left corner, and a single word on the second line, custodian. She sat at the kitchen table, sun slanting through the blinds in quiet bands, and opened it with the precision of someone unwrapping something sacred. Inside, a welcome letter from the brokerage firm, account summary, routing instructions. Everything neat, confirmed, funded. Harper Educational Trust, beneficiary, Harper Elise Myers. Custodian, Caroline Birch, account type. 529 plan, independent contributor. No one else was listed, no secondary, no shared access. Just her, just Harper. The scent of tea steeping filled the space, chamomile, this time. She let the envelope sit untouched, while the kettle whistled itself calm. When she returned with 2 mismatched mugs, Harper was already at the door, cheeks red from the wind, eyes bright from the cold. I didn't know if you'd actually want to do this every weekend, Harper said, shrugging out of her coat. Caroline held up the mugs. Tea's already steeping, so either you're consistent or I'm psychic. Harper grinned and stepped inside. The new routine had started the weekend after the snow. Saturday afternoons, no agendas, just a quiet hour with something warm, and lately, something sweet. Harper brought shortbread cookies this time, slightly overbaked. It had already become a kind of tradition. Imperfect treats, steeped leaves, no family talk unless they wanted it. Caroline handed Harper the envelope halfway through her second sip. "What's this?" Harper asked, eyebrows knitting as she pulled the papers free. She read the top line, stopped, read it again. Caroline said nothing. Harper's hands trembled, just slightly, as she flipped through the pages. "This is tuition, room and board, books. This is everything." Caroline stirred her tea. "It's a start." "You don't have to do this," Harper said, her voice catching in the back of her throat. She looked up. "Caroline, you really don't. That's why I want to." The silence that followed was softer than tears, thicker than gratitude. Harper folded the papers and placed them gently back inside the envelope, as if afraid it might tear from the weight of what it meant. "I don't know what to say." Caroline gave her a small smile. "Then don't. Just don't stay small." They drank the rest of the tea in near silence, only the occasional clink of porcelain or sigh of the heater between them. Later, they worked side by side in the den, Harper reading articles about scholarships on her laptop, Caroline sorting through property documents in a folder marked Trust Assets. A legal pad sat open in front of her, filled with Joan's notes in sharp, tight handwriting. Joan had been, surprisingly, efficient. Since Caroline's estate transfer, she'd stepped in with a kind of bracing competence, filing the quitclaim deed, getting the title attorney on the phone, even calling the county office herself when the clerk filed the wrong parcel code. "You're lucky," Joan had said over speakerphone earlier that week. "Most people your age don't figure this out until their estate's already been cannibalized by in-laws and probate court." "I'm not most people," Caroline had replied. Joan hadn't argued. That night, Caroline placed the newly signed deed into her safe. Everything was tidy now, simple. Every brick of the home, legally, emotionally, now belonged to the future she chose, and it was hers to give. Later, as Harper pulled on her coat to leave, she paused at the door. "I know you said you're not angry," she said softly, "but if you ever get there, angry, I mean, I just want you to know, I'd understand." Caroline looked at her. Something flashed across her face, quick, quiet, gone. She reached out and squeezed Harper's arm. "I'm not angry," she said, "but I remember everything." Outside, the wind had picked up again. Harper pulled her scarf up over her chin and disappeared into the cold, the porch light catching on her breath like fog. Caroline stood there for a moment longer, hand still resting on the doorknob. Then she went inside and opened the calendar app on her phone. April 12th. She tapped the date, added a new event, no title, no reminder, just a pin. The future was taken care of. Now it was time to decide what to do with the past. The text from Rachel sat unread at the top of the screen, time-stamped at 9:17 a.m. Hey, just checking. Did you RSVP for April yet? Venue's being weird about final head count. Caroline didn't tap it, didn't even let the preview scroll to the end. She simply swiped left and hit archive, watching it vanish without opening, like brushing lint from a sweater she no longer wore. She slid her phone into the drawer and stood. A white index card lay on the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl. It had taken her 3 tries to get the handwriting right, centered, clean, not too firm. Visits by appointment only. Please respect this space. Caroline, she opened the front door, taped it neatly to the glass, then stepped back and looked at it for a long moment. It was not hostile. It was not sad. It was simply true. She shut the door, locked it. Joan arrived 20 minutes later with a canvas tote bag full of tools and hardware. They never had keys, Caroline said as she cleared space beneath the door frame. Joan held up the deadbolt anyway. You and I both know that doesn't matter. She worked quickly, steady hands, clear motions. Within the hour, the lock was changed, the screws tightened, the spare keys handed out. 2 copies, one for Caroline, one for the safe. As Joan packed up, she caught Caroline's gaze. This feels permanent now. Caroline nodded. It is. No ceremony followed. No toast, no tea. Joan gave a sharp nod and left, coat flapping behind her in the wind. Caroline closed the door behind her, locked it. Upstairs, the sunlight cut across the bed in clean lines. She sat with her laptop and opened the last digital thread still left intact. Birch album, family share. Created by Rachel, populated by years of photos Caroline had taken but rarely appeared in. She clicked manage members, Rachel, Adam, Joan, 2 cousins, 1 niece who'd unfriended her years ago but never removed access. Caroline scrolled to the bottom and clicked leave album. A prompt popped up. Are you sure? You'll lose access to all shared photos. She clicked yes. A beat later, the screen refreshed. Blank. It was the first time in years she'd been untagged from her own memories. Downstairs, her planner was open to April, but this morning, her pen had wandered toward a different day. February 19th, lunch with Tess. She flipped the page and reread the name she'd scribbled. Tess Manley, senior right-sizing and move consultant. They met at a cafe near the public library. Tess wore a camel coat and sensible earrings, and carried a leather-bound notebook that looked like it had seen 100 quiet exits before this one. Caroline offered no small talk. I'd like to talk about smaller spaces, she said as they sat. And lighter living. Tess didn't flinch. Let's start with what's weighing the most. Caroline blinked once, then smiled. I already let that go. They talked for nearly an hour. Square footage, storage units, closets that didn't make sense anymore. Caroline had no intention of rushing, but just naming the possibility felt like air lifting off her shoulders. I want a space I choose, Caroline said, not the one I got stuck defending. Tess scribbled notes. No basement? No ghosts, Caroline clarified. They smiled. By the end of the meeting, they'd booked a preliminary walkthrough of Caroline's home. No promises, no timeline, but the idea was real now, planted. After Tess left, Caroline stayed in her seat, stirred the last of her coffee, and pulled her phone from her coat pocket. She opened the calendar. April 12th, the pinned date. She tapped it, scrolled down, clicked edit. Under notes, she typed 5 words, not attending, but not absent. She hit save, and for the first time in months, she turned off her phone, not because she needed space, but because she finally had it. The caption under Rachel's Instagram post was 2 paragraphs long and an inch too wide in sentiment. Families aren't perfect, but love shows up anyway. Even when some people pull away, we carry them with grace. Chosen family. Let them go with kindness. The photo showed Adam and Rachel seated in a vineyard tasting room, him smug behind a flute of sparkling rosé, her in a white wool coat with her chin tilted like a Hallmark bride. In the background, a caption board leaning against a barrel. She said yes. He said finally. We said welcome back, love. Caroline stared at the image for a long, unblinking moment. Then she took a screenshot. She opened her email, typed a new message to Eli Granger, and attached the file. Subject line, intent file, addendum, Bauhertu, body. Adding this for the record, should they attempt to challenge the trust or claim emotional estrangement was unprovoked, this helps clarify the tone and timing of public misrepresentation. CB. She hit send and felt nothing. No burn, no ache, just the soft click of another lock sliding into place. That afternoon, she opened a blank Word document and began typing with unhurried precision. Personal statement of intent for inclusion in estate, trust, and healthcare directives. This document affirms that the individuals previously removed from my legal documents, namely Adam Reed and Rachel Carson, have not been excluded due to confusion, mental incapacity, coercion, or temporary estrangement. They are excluded by design, not for lack of family, but for lack of care, not in anger, but in clarity. This is not punitive. It is protective. No contact is my wish. No legacy is their right. Caroline Birch. February 27th, she printed it, signed it in blue ink, scanned and uploaded a PDF to her estate folder labeled Legal Final, 2025 Trust. Then she emailed it to both Eli and Joan with the subject line, Clarity is kindness. Joan called 20 minutes later. I saw the post, she said, without greeting. So did I. They're clapping for their own cruelty, Joan muttered, and trying to stage it like mercy. I know, Joan exhaled. You want me to respond? No, Caroline said calmly. I'm muting the audience. That same day, she called her healthcare provider and formally updated her records. A digital form allowed her to attach legal directives and a statement of privacy boundaries. Under special instructions, she typed, no medical or health information is to be disclosed to Adam Reed or Rachel Carson under any circumstances, regardless of marital status, perceived familial connection, or public inquiry. Then, in a separate call, she contacted the Office of the State Attorney General, not to report a crime, but to formally declare the existence of a high-risk estate, flagging her trust and living directives with intent notes in case of fraudulent claims. The woman on the line sounded slightly startled, but impressed. You're doing all this preemptively? Caroline replied simply. I've seen what happens when you wait for someone else to write the version of you that survives. By sundown, every gate was drawn, every channel closed. The paper trail of her intentions was cleaner than her countertop. She poured a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and scrolled briefly through her muted contacts. One photo remained visible, Harper in a college hoodie, grinning next to a half-finished puzzle. She saved it to her desktop and named the file What's Worth Keeping.png. Just before bed, she logged into the RSVP portal that Rachel had sent months ago and had long since been buried under archived texts. There was still a login page, still a digital guest list, still an empty space beside her name. She didn't RSVP, but she downloaded the guest list and began to underline names. Harper didn't knock this time. She let herself in with the spare key Caroline had pressed into her hand 2 Saturdays ago, tucked inside a tea tin. Caroline was in the kitchen, standing barefoot in front of the stove, spooning roasted carrots onto 2 plates. A pot of jasmine rice steamed behind her. No centerpiece, no wine pairings, just dinner, warm, seasoned, honest. I brought something, Harper said, her voice small but steady. Caroline turned. Please say it's not more muffins. Harper shook her head and held out a white envelope, edges slightly bent from being carried in a coat pocket. Caroline wiped her hands on a dish towel and took it wordlessly. Opened the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once, written in pen. No preamble, just Harper's script, looped and crooked from haste. You taught me how to be without raising your voice, how to choose quiet and still mean it, how to hold a door open without expecting anyone to walk through it. They taught me rules. You taught me boundaries. That's what I'm taking with me. Thank you. Harper Caroline stared at the page for a long moment, then folded it carefully, not just once, but twice, and walked into the den. She unlocked the fireproof safe, the one now organized with color-coded tabs and protective sleeves, removed a file labeled Legacy, True, and slid the letter inside. When she returned, Harper was all ready, plating her food. You okay? Harper asked. Caroline nodded. I've never been more okay. They ate in the quiet hum of small forks and deep comfort, the kind of dinner that asked for nothing, no grace, no performance, no tradition. Just presence. After seconds and a shared bowl of honey-drizzled fruit, Harper leaned back in her chair. You know, she said slowly, they won't forgive you for any of this. Caroline looked across the table, eyes calm, mouth unreadable. That's the goal. Harper blinked, startled. Then she laughed, really laughed, and it landed like fresh air in a sealed room. God, that's good, she said, wiping a tear. Caroline took a sip of her tea, then added, let them carry their forgiveness like luggage. I've unpacked. Later, Harper hugged her at the door. Not a light, polite goodbye. Not the performative, stiff-armed pat of family taught to tolerate each other. It was a full-bodied, breath-held, eyes-shut kind of hug. The kind you give someone who changed your direction, not loudly, not grandly, but irreversibly. I'll call you after my interview, Harper whispered. I know, Caroline said. And if you don't, I'll still be here. The door shut quietly behind her. Caroline returned to the kitchen, started rinsing dishes, one by one. Outside, the wind had picked up again. She didn't check her phone, didn't glance at the news. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. After the last plate was set in the drying rack, she walked to her desk, opened her calendar, and tapped the date again. April 12th. She opened the guest list, scrolled to the bottom, highlighted 5 names. People she'd never met, but who mattered to Adam, business partners, a distant cousin from his side, a former boss whose approval he'd always chased. The kind of guests who still saw her as the one who held everything together. She opened a new document, typed a name at the top, to whom it used to concern, and began to write. The condo building sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac shaded by maples, their branches just starting to fuzz with early spring buds. No gate, no sign-in, just quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't ask questions. Caroline stood on the sidewalk for a moment before going in. The leasing agent had already texted to say the unit was ready for walkthrough. No pressure, the message read. Take your time. Unit 2B was tucked at the end of the hall, past a painting of a sailboat and 2 potted plants, someone clearly watered without fail. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, new floors, wide windows, no stairs. The walls were pale blue, too plain for some people, but they felt like air to her. She stepped into the bathroom. Walk-in shower, no curtain to cling to her shoulders, no tub lip to trip over. Everything flat, accessible, decided. She walked the perimeter of each room, pausing in corners the way one might test for echo. There was no hum of old tension here, no architectural memory. It was a home that had never learned her name. She signed the lease that day. Back at the house, Caroline didn't tell anyone. She simply began. Boxes started appearing in stacks, clean cardboard with black marker labels, her handwriting tight and slanted. Kitchen, keep. Books, donate. Photos, mine only. Each box had meaning, but none had fanfare. No one posted a farewell, no porch sale, no clues. Tess came by with a dolly and packing tape. Joan arrived with gloves and a thermos of coffee. They didn't ask who knew. They didn't ask who didn't. In less than 3 days, the living room emptied of anything loud. No ticking clock, no heavy table, just sunlight on bare floorboards and 2 teacups drying in the rack. Feels surgical, Joan muttered, watching Caroline fold the last linen set into a bin. It is, Caroline replied. Clean edges, no bleeding. Mail forwarding was submitted online. Bank accounts updated. Eli notified. Voting registration changed. No mass email. No social post. No little note with a cute moving graphic and a photo of a new address scribbled in faux calligraphy. Just absence. They would find out the way they'd earned it, by wondering where she went after she stopped being useful. On the final morning, Harper came by in a rideshare car, backpack over one shoulder, college acceptance folder under one arm. Her eyes widened as she stepped inside the empty space. "You really did it," Caroline smiled, passing her a small slip of paper folded in half. Harper unfolded it. A new address, apartment number written in blue ink. No flourish, just a truth. "You're the only one who gets it," Caroline said. "Use it when you want, not before." Harper hugged her, quick and fierce. "You ready?" Tess called from outside. The back of the SUV open. Caroline turned back once, just for a breath. The house looked smaller, not older, not sadder, just finally the right size in her memory. She closed the door behind her and didn't leave a forwarding message on the fridge. Later that afternoon, as the movers wheeled the last box into the condo and Tess adjusted the shelf height in the pantry, Caroline stepped onto her small private balcony, a single chair, a folded blanket. Her view, trees, sky. One cat sunbathing on a ledge across the courtyard. Her phone buzzed once, a missed call, unknown number. She didn't answer, but she opened the voicemail, silent, then muffled background noise, then Rachel's voice, hesitant, rehearsed. "Hey, so, we just realized the house line isn't working, and Adam's been trying to confirm dinner for the rehearsal, and anyway, I guess you're busy. Let us know, please?" Caroline tapped delete. Then she opened her notes app, typed one sentence. "They can't reach me because I didn't leave the door open." She hit save. And for the first time in her adult life, no one knew where to find her unless she wanted them to. The old house still had its charm in spring. The shutters freshly painted by the new tenants, the walkway trimmed with early tulips. Adam stood on the porch holding a brown paper bag, creased at the corners, handles thin from weight. Inside, 2 containers of overpriced takeout, his idea of a peace offering. A neighbor raking mulch paused, glanced up from across the yard. "She doesn't live there anymore," he called out. Adam turned, caught off guard. "What?" "Woman who used to live there. She moved a while back." Adam blinked. "Are you sure?" "She had a moving truck. 3 days. Gone." Adam looked back at the door, as if still expecting it to open, but it didn't. No name on the mailbox. No welcome mat. Just that unfamiliar stillness of something that no longer included him. He hesitated, then knelt and placed the bag gently on the step, like a man returning something borrowed long ago and hoping no one opened the door while he did it. Then he left. Joan pulled up 15 minutes later, windows down, sunglasses on. She'd known it was coming. The missed call, the voicemail, the passive offering. He was nothing if not predictably late to sincerity. She stepped out of the car, walked up the drive, and peered into the bag. Thai food, neatly packed, still warm. Joan rolled her eyes. Not poisoned. Shame. She picked up the bag and placed it in the back seat, already knowing where it would go. The downtown shelter had a fridge for unopened donations. Someone who needed it would eat tonight. Not Caroline. She didn't call to tell her. She didn't need to. At that very moment, Caroline was sitting on her narrow balcony with a cup of green tea and a wool shawl draped over her shoulders. The sun was lowering itself into the trees like it had time to think about it. Golden light streaked across the condo's brick facade, and a squirrel sat balanced on the railing across from her, as if listening in. She took a sip and let the moment settle. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel hollow. She felt accurate. Inside, her phone buzzed gently on the counter. She didn't rush. When she picked it up, it was a reminder she'd set the week she moved in. Finalize contacts. She opened her emergency contact list. Joan and Harper were listed. A third name, Adam Reed, still hovered there, gray and outdated. She tapped edit, tapped the red minus. Confirmed delete, gone. Then she opened her messages, searched for his number, still there, all lowercase, no photo. The last message. Let me know if you still want to be included in the head count for rehearsal. She held her finger on the thread. The options popped up. Delete, block, silence. She chose none of them. Instead, she archived it. Not erased, just irrelevant. She placed the phone face down, leaned back in the chair. Let the silence bloom. Down on the sidewalk, A couple walked past with a dog in a sweater. The wind carried their laughter up to her balcony, and for once, it didn't feel like something she was missing. It felt like something she had chosen to be above. Caroline closed her eyes. She hadn't slammed the door. She'd just stopped answering the one he never knocked on. The email from Eli Granger came in just before noon. Subject line: Formal disclosure request. Declined. Caroline opened it while stirring lentil soup, one hand on the wooden spoon, the other scrolling with slow precision. She read it twice. No flourishes, no legalese for legalese's sake. Just clarity. Dear Ms. Birch, per your directives filed on February 27th and March 18th, I have submitted a formal denial of information release to Adam Reed and Rachel Carson, as requested. Language used: client has formally opted out of all familial disclosures. No exceptions. Attached: time-stamped confirmation, notarized copy of denial letter for your records. Respectfully, E. Granger. Caroline tapped download, printed it immediately, and slid the pages into the legal enforcement tab of her estate binder. She didn't text anyone about it. Didn't email Joan. Didn't tell Harper. This wasn't a move for applause. It was a boundary with a receipt. Later that evening, while folding laundry in neat stacks, her phone vibrated with a notification from her archive folder. Rachel's name blinked across the screen like a mosquito against glass. Wedding access, emergency contact, estate clarification. She didn't open it, just read the preview. Hi, Caroline. I don't know if your lawyer told you we reached out. Just wanted to clarify some things and see if you'd be willing to. Caroline tapped archive without opening it. The silence that followed was louder than any reply could have been. That night, Harper called. Dad's pissed, she said. He got the letter. Caroline didn't respond immediately. She was slicing lemon peel into a small cup of tea. The rind curled into itself like punctuation. He called me, wanted to know if you were still of sound mind. Now she looked up. What did you say? I told him the truth, that you're more sound than he's ever been, that you've thought harder about who you are in the last 6 months than he has in the last 6 decades. Caroline took a breath. And how'd he respond? A pause on the line. Harper exhaled. He said you were senile, and that eventually I'd see that. The cup paused midair. Did he now? Harper hesitated. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, Caroline said, voice calm. Forward it to me. 10 minutes later, the text appeared in Caroline's inbox. adam.readicloud.com. She's senile. You'll see. This whole thing is just a late life tantrum. Give it time. She'll crawl back when she realizes how this ends. Caroline clicked print. The machine hummed quietly in the background. She opened her binder, slid the new page into a fresh tab labeled Attempted Discredit, Summer 2025. When she closed the folder, it clicked shut with the satisfying sound of proof preserved. She placed it back in her safe, set the tea beside her, walked out onto the balcony. The night was warm with the smell of lilacs from the neighbor's window box. Somewhere, a wind chime rattled. Not gently, but sharply, like someone disagreeing with the breeze. Caroline wrapped the shawl around her shoulders, sipped her tea. She was not crawling back. She was watching them build the story that would bury them. And she was documenting every word. The building looked like nothing at all from the outside. Low brick, glass doors, a faded red bench out front. A kid on a skateboard rolled by without glancing up. No banners, no ribbon-cutting photos hung in the lobby. Just clean linoleum and the smell of pencil shavings and sanitizer. Caroline stepped inside the Bridge Center with her coat unzipped and her collar turned down, like she didn't want the wind or the moment to follow her in. A woman at the desk smiled and nodded. You here to see the resource wing? Caroline simply said, just looking around. She walked past posters for peer counseling groups and low-sensory tutoring hours, past art made by hands learning how to feel safe again. The air felt different in here, less like a facility, more like a kept promise. At the end of the hall was a narrow alcove with 2 new doors and a donated reading bench tucked between them. On the wall just above the bench was a small brass plaque, no bigger than a paperback. The inscription was simple. This space made possible by the Birch Trust, in quiet honor of lives rebuilt. Her name wasn't bolded, wasn't centered, but it was there, brass, screwed in, permanent. Caroline stared at it for a moment, then sat on the bench and rested her hand on the wood beside her. She didn't cry, she didn't pose. She just was in the space she helped create, without ever needing to be thanked for it. From down the hallway came Harper's soft footsteps. She was holding her phone, angled low, already framing the shot. "Don't move," she said. Caroline didn't. Harper took one photo, no flash, no prompt to smile, just light from the window and that one name, catching the afternoon sun like something found, not made. "I'm framing it," Harper said. Caroline stood. "It's not really about me." Harper raised an eyebrow. "That's what makes it worthy of the wall." They walked back toward the lobby in silence, their steps in rhythm without planning it. Joan was waiting outside, leaning against her car, arms crossed and sunglasses perched halfway down her nose. She pointed toward the building with a chin tilt. That's more than they'll ever give anyone." Caroline opened the car door, paused just before sitting. "It's more than they ever gave me." Joan didn't argue. She just nodded once, like someone checking off the last box in a long-running tally. As they pulled away, Caroline glanced back once. The bench disappeared behind the glass, then the sidewalk, then the slow turn of the street. She didn't need to see it again. It was already written in the kind of material they could never scratch off. Back at the condo, Harper placed the framed photo on Caroline's bookshelf, between a cookbook and a slim binder labeled plans. Final but flexible. "Where everyone can see it?" Harper asked. Caroline shook her head. "No," and opened a drawer. She placed it inside, closed it. "That's just for us." The smell of rosemary and toasted sourdough filled the condo, not heavy or rich, just warm, like someone had cooked with intention, but not obligation. The kitchen window was cracked half an inch to let in the crisp November air. Caroline liked it that way. Enough breeze to remind her the world was still turning, but not enough to disrupt the peace she had built like a shelter. It was Thanksgiving. There was no turkey, no centerpiece, no casserole rotation, no 3 kinds of pie to appease everyone's preferences. The table was set for 2. Just 2. One seat across from the other, no folding chairs, no half-resentful place cards, no guests on their phones, no napkins folded to impress people who would forget them before dessert. In the middle of the table sat a single beeswax candle, flickering like it knew it had no competition this year. A plate of scrambled eggs, chives sprinkled lightly on top, a bowl of roasted pears and cinnamon, and Harper's favorite, burnt-edged toast, buttered just before sitting. Caroline poured sweet tea into glasses she'd pulled from the high shelf. The ones with the ivy pattern she never used during holidays because they weren't holiday enough. They were hers, though, which was enough now. Harper arrived exactly when she said she would. No flurry of apologies, no perfume cloud. Just a knit hat pushed back on her curls, and a quiet smile that reached her eyes. "You cooked," Harper said, stepping out of her coat. Caroline raised one eyebrow. "If you can call eggs and toast cooking, it smells better than any year I can remember." They sat, ate, talked. Not about politics or missed RSVPs or who wasn't speaking to whom. They talked about Harper's classes. The professor who wore sandals year-round and taught existentialism like a stand-up act. The bookstore near her dorm that carried used cookbooks with notes from previous owners scribbled in the margins. They laughed. Not politely, not performatively, genuinely. Caroline didn't hover, didn't offer seconds like an apology, didn't scan Harper's face for signs of hidden disappointment. She just ate and listened and enjoyed. After brunch, they cleared the dishes together. Caroline rinsed, Harper dried. The same rhythm they'd settled into over months of Saturdays. The radio hummed in the background, some jazz instrumental that didn't demand attention. Then Caroline walked over to the pantry, pulled down the old calendar that had hung there all year. She flipped to November. The faint marker circle was still there. Thanksgiving, 1 p.m., hosting, written in a hand she didn't recognize as her own anymore. She peeled the page away, tore it from the spiral with clean precision. The rest of the calendar followed. She opened a drawer, pulled out the new one, simple, blank. She hung it up. Across the top, where themed quotes or seasonal images might have been, were 5 words, printed in firm, capital letters: "No guests, no guilt." Harper stood in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Did you make that?" Caroline nodded. "It's perfect," Harper said. Caroline turned. "It's the only thing I've ever written on a wall that I didn't want to take back." There were no leftovers parceled up for people who didn't thank her. No coat closet stuffed with belongings that would be forgotten until spring. No lingering resentment disguised as family loyalty. Just space, and choice, and peace. They sat on the couch after, legs tucked beneath the soft weight of throw blankets. A baking show played on mute. Outside, the wind stirred the branches but didn't rattle them. It was the kind of day that didn't ask for much, and in return, gave everything. Caroline looked over at Harper. Her posture was relaxed. Her eyes were soft, not guarded. She had grown into her own skin, the way only someone who had been made to feel small could. "I used to make 5 pies," Caroline said. "Pumpkin, apple, cherry, chocolate, and lemon. Just so no one would have to choose." Harper smiled. "And?" They all picked at each one and said nothing. They were quiet for a moment. Caroline stood and walked into the kitchen, refilled her tea. On the way back, she paused at the shelf. Her hand brushed over the binder labeled "Plans," final but flexible. Then the closed drawer where the framed photo of the youth center's plaque now lived. Harper looked up. "Do you miss them, even a little?" Caroline didn't answer right away. She walked back to the couch, sat down, placed the mug carefully on the coaster. "No," she said finally. "I miss who I thought they might eventually become. Not who they were? No, I knew who they were. I just couldn't admit it." The sunlight slid across the floor like it was trying to wrap the room in a slow exhale. Caroline reached for a blanket and pulled it over both their legs. Harper leaned her head lightly against her shoulder. They sat like that for a long time. As the light shifted and the shadows lengthened across the hardwood floor, Harper whispered, "This might be the best Thanksgiving I've ever had." Caroline smiled. Not politely, not performatively, genuinely. "I hope it's the worst one from now on," she said, "because that means they just keep getting better." Harper laughed. "I'll drink to that." They toasted with tea. And when Harper finally stood to leave, she didn't linger. She didn't offer to stay out of obligation. She hugged Caroline tightly, like someone who would always come back because she wanted to, not because she felt guilted into it. After the door closed, Caroline washed the last glass, turned off the lights, and stepped out onto her balcony. The sun was low now, orange brushing the horizon like a slow fire. She thought about the years of meals cooked for people who belittled the way she folded napkins, who asked for a different fork, who arrived late and left early and called it tradition. She thought about last year, Adam, standing by the door with his coat already on. "You should be grateful we even came," he'd muttered. And she had nodded then, too exhausted to answer. Tonight she whispered the answer aloud. "I was." She looked out across the sky, tea in hand, wind brushing her cheek like a quiet permission. "And so I made sure he'd never come again." A long breath, then, "And I've been grateful ever since."